Most fantasy stories don't fail because they are unoriginal, but because they spend 300 pages setting up a world that no one asked to care about. I've been writing and studying fantasy stories for 25 years now, and I've seen it again and again. Writers who've poured their soul into their magic, maps, or timelines, only to realize readers don't give a damn unless those things do something. So in this video, I'm going to show you what fantasy readers actually crave, how to make your world building feel unforgettable rather than ornamental, and why this advice isn't the recycled sludge you've already heard before. You see, here's the real difference. Most writing tips tell you what readers notice. I want to show you what readers feel, because the fantasy that sticks in someone's bones isn't just clever, it's earned. And the first thing it has to earn is the emotional payoff. Payoffs are like trapdoors. Built right, they look like ordinary floorboards until the moment they open. And when they do, everything you set up before them falls through at once. A great payoff doesn't say, look how strong the hero is. It says, of course it came to this, and now it hurts just right. That's what makes a reader pause mid-page, blink hard, then flip back 2 chapters to feel it all over again. So what actually makes that trapdoor snap open? It's not just victory, it's who the character had to become to reach it. The win has to match the growth. If your main character starts out selfish and scared, and your ending gives them a leadership role, don't let it happen just because they've made one brave speech. Give them scenes that scrape away the old version of themselves. Force them to give something up that used to protect them. Have them fail to save someone early because they didn't listen, and succeed later because they finally did. You're not just showing progress here, you're resolving tension. But payoffs don't work in isolation. They only hit hard when something breaks first and stays broken. So now we need to look at what gives those moments weight long after they've passed. Consider this tiny story here. In a small town under siege, a young sorcerer breaks the laws of magic to protect a crowd of strangers. The fire spell saves everyone, but sets off a shockwave that burns through the town's crops for miles. The next day, the villagers thank him. The next week, they exile him. The spell saved their lives, but it destroyed the future. And that's what lasts. Not the explosion, not the heroism, the ripple that came after. That's the power of real consequences. They don't end scenes, they infect the next ones. Here's how to build that kind of impact. First, skip the character deaths, unless you're ready to make the story about the hole they leave behind. Most of the time, a lived consequence is stronger than a lost one. Give your character a visible scar, not just on their body, but on how people treat them. Show us the Ellie who flinches now, the door that no longer opens, the voice that trembles when it didn't before. Better yet, show how the character's own behavior starts to shift. If they broke a vow, don't say they feel guilty. Show them hesitating the next time someone puts trust in them. These kinds of shifts hit because they build. Every choice echoes forward, every consequence alters the lens. Because now the reader isn't just watching fallout, they are watching someone live inside it and struggle to find their way out of it. And that tension, that's where transformation begins. But consequences alone do not guarantee growth. That only happens when your character keeps running into the one thing they still believe and starts to lose the fight. Think of character growth like a hinge. It only moves when 2 things push in opposite directions. That's where most arcs fall apart. They only push from one side, cool events, big challenges, but they don't push against anything inside the character. And if there's no internal resistance, there's no tension, no click, no hinge. So here's a 3-part test to make sure your character arc actually bends. First, want versus wiring. Give your character an external goal and then give them a mindset that works against it. A hero who wants to lead but can't stop micromanaging. Or a warrior who wants peace but still reaches for violence. This isn't about contradiction for drama's sake, it's about giving the arc friction, something that grinds. Step 2 then is misbelief in motion. Give your character a core assumption about the world that makes their life easier but quietly keeps them stuck. If I stay useful, they won't leave me. If I stay angry, nothing can hurt me. These don't need to be spoken out loud, just watch how they steer the character's early decisions. And step 3 is about delayed breakthrough. Build the arc so that growth almost happens and then slips. Let them get close to change, then backslide. The moment they finally cross the threshold should feel risky, not clean. So what does this actually look like in a scene? Say your main character refuses help early on because they don't trust anyone to stay. Later, they get cornered, cannot win alone, and someone offers to help. This time, they say yes. But don't stop there because it still feels too clean. Let them flinch when that person actually follows through. Let them mess up the next moment and then try again. Growth always lands harder when it looks like recovery, not revelation. This is how you build an arc that sticks, not by handing the character a better version of themselves, but by showing what they had to give up to get there. It's easy to pretend you're changing when no one's watching, but the moment someone else sees through the cracks, that's when growth gets real, or falls apart. Writing great character bonds is like building a bridge from both ends. Each side has to bring weight, history, stakes. And the middle doesn't just connect because the characters like each other. It connects because they had to cross something difficult to meet there. That's the difference between a trope and a relationship. Tropes say these two types go together. Real relationships show why they struggle and what it means when they still try anyway. So here's how to build friendships that hit hard. Give them a moment of misalignment. Maybe one character thinks they're allies, the other isn't sure. Let that early friction shape how they speak to each other, or don't speak. Then give them a shared risk, something small at first, a lie they have to protect, a danger they face together. Let them succeed, but not cleanly. And now give them a moment where that trust wobbles. One forgets something important maybe, or the other goes too far. Let the relationship take a hit, then watch how they repair it or fail to do so. That's what makes it land, not the banter, not the found family label. The tension, the tries, the space where something almost breaks, but it doesn't. And once you've built a connection like that, it becomes more than support, it becomes pressure. It forces your characters to grow, not just for the plot, but because they are being seen. Belief though doesn't shift quietly. It gets tested, challenged, even weaponized. And when it shows up in every decision your characters make, that's when your story stops entertaining and starts to show its real meaning. You see, theme is like background music in a film. You don't always notice it, but when it's done right, it changes how everything feels. A simple scene hits harder, a decision feels heavier, and by the end, you're not just watching what happened, you're sensing why it mattered. But theme only works if you build it into what characters do, not what they say. So start with a belief your protagonist lives by, without questioning it. That belief becomes the music of your story. And now write scenes that test it, bend it, or expose its limits. If your hero thinks strength keeps people safe, give them a moment where their strength causes harm. If they believe truth is always noble, show them telling it and losing someone because of it. This is how theme emerges, not in monologues, in consequences. And the best part? You don't have to solve the theme. You just have to make the reader feel like it's pulsing underneath every choice. Because when that final scene hits and the music stops, the silence should still say something. But having said that, what happens when two characters believe in different right answers and both are willing to bleed for them? That's when your story moves from theme to test. Now, a good moral dilemma is like a pressure valve. Turn it slowly and it builds tension. Force it and something breaks. Too many fantasy characters are written like they only exist at the break. The villain who kills for a good cause, the hero who always questions the mission. But true complexity doesn't start there if you ask me. It starts with competing values that make sense, until the world stops letting them coexist. Here's how to build that into your cast. First, give each major character a pair of values that both feel justified but lead in opposite directions. Freedom and order, loyalty and honesty, mercy and survival. Then design scenes that make them choose between them. A loyal general might have to disobey a direct order to save lives. A kind thief might have to sacrifice someone else's secret to protect their own. These aren't gray, they are clear until they collide. And now turn up the pressure. The more visible the cost, the sharper the tension. If your hero chooses love over duty, let someone else suffer the fallout. Or if your villain protects the innocent, but topples a city to do it, don't justify them. Show how the world reacts. Let that response feel earned, not narrated. And with all this, there's one thing that's critical. Do not soften your protagonist's inner line. Let them bend, let them hesitate, let them almost agree with someone they hate. This makes the reader question not just what's right, but what they would want to be right. That's the mark of real complexity. Not darkness, not ambiguity. Just characters who struggle with the same contradictions we do under even bigger pressure. And when those contradictions finally break, they shouldn't end the character. They should change the stakes for everyone else. Because once morality starts to shift, every rule of the world suddenly feels unstable, and that's when your story can finally get unpredictable. And when it comes to unpredictability, fantasy creatures are a great way to go. Let me make it simple here. If you invent a creature for your fantasy story and the plot would play out the same way without it, it's probably a prop, not a presence. Cool design is fine, but what readers remember is function. What does this creature do to your world, your characters, your conflict? You don't need a full biology doc, you just need one narrative purpose that gives the creature weight, something the story cannot do without. Here's an example. Say you invent a species of birds that mimic the last sound it hears. Cute enough, but now imagine this. A character tries to cover up a murder, and the bird keeps repeating the victim's final word. Suddenly that bird isn't flavor, it's pressure. Now your cast has to deal with something because the creature does something. And from there, change the stakes of a scene. Your characters plan a heist, but the creature they thought was harmless panics under pressure and sets off a chain reaction. That's what makes the scene stick, not danger, complication. And as a step 3, mirror or challenge a character. Consider a wild, misunderstood beast that only calms when sung to, and the only one who knows the tune is your emotionally shut down protagonist. That's not a gimmick anymore, that's growth dressed as a problem. That doesn't mean the creature has to be central, it just needs to matter more than it looks. If you're sketching a creature right now, ask yourself, what does it force the characters to feel, to hide, or to do differently? If there's no answer to that, the creature probably doesn't have a purpose yet. But even if you manage to create a creature with meaning, imagine what happens when the rules of reality get that kind of meaning too. Because once your magic starts saying something, the whole world starts listening. Think of magic like a currency, but one that's baked by emotion instead of gold. If your magic system lets anyone do anything anytime with no trade-off, it's like handing out blank checks. It spends well for a few chapters, but eventually the economy crashes. Stakes collapse, tension drops to zero. But when the magic comes with a cost, and that cost means something, now you're working with emotional gravity. But here's how to make your system resonate. First, give it a value source, not just energy or mana. Think conceptually. Maybe every spell shortens the caster's shadow, and when it's gone, so are they. Second, choose a behavioral consequence. Don't let the cost be invisible. If the spell damages their hands, let us see them hide the injury. If the magic weakens over time, show the character a lie about how much strength they have left. Third then is to let the limitations create character pressure. If the magic only works when you're calm, what happens in a crisis? Now you're not writing spells anymore, you're writing conflict. You're not handing out powers, you're handing out choices with real emotional costs. Right magic systems, in my opinion, don't just give your world rules, they give your characters tension. And when tension builds long enough, there's only one thing left for it to do. It either breaks, or it reveals that things weren't as they appeared to be all the time. Think of The Sixth Sense here. For most of the film, it plays like a quiet supernatural drama. A troubled child, a well-meaning psychologist, and the slow unraveling of a haunting mystery. But when the twist lands, that Dr. Malcolm has been dead the entire time, it doesn't feel like the story pulled a fast one. It feels inevitable. Every earlier scene replays in your mind. The restaurant, the basement door, his wife's silence. Suddenly all those moments weren't random anymore. They were precision-laid tripwires, and we stepped over every single one without noticing. That's what great plot twists do. They don't just deliver shock, they deliver clarity. Now in fantasy, there's a temptation to think twists have to be massive. The villain is secretly the hero's father, the prophecy was mistranslated, the world was an illusion. But scale doesn't make a twist work. Structure does, setup does, and emotional alignment does. So how do you write a twist that lands without feeling cheap? Well, start by don't treating it like a secret. Treat it like a second story, one that's happening in the margins of the first. That means giving the reader just enough to suspect something is off. Not through exposition, but through behavior. Like a side character who always shows up too fast, or a hero who forgets the same name twice. Details that feel strange, but not yet significant. Overall, this hits hardest when the twist forces a re-evaluation, not just of facts, but of values. Maybe your character thought they were protecting the innocent, only to learn they've been enforcing a lie. The reader doesn't just want surprise, they want satisfaction. That moment when everything clicks into place, and suddenly the quietest sentence from chapter 2 explodes with meaning. Done well, a twist doesn't just pull the rug out, it pulls the lens back. You don't just see the story differently, You see the world through new rules. And if your character's been walking a path they thought they understood, suddenly that ground gets unstable. Because now every law, every belief, every truth they trusted has to hold up under pressure. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Into the kind of world building that doesn't just support your story, it pushes back. A great fantasy world doesn't start with a map, it starts with pressure. Not the pressure of war or prophecy, at least not yet. I mean the pressure that makes everyday decisions hard, that turns ordinary actions into battlegrounds for belief. Take something like food. In the Broken Earth trilogy, people don't just farm, they do it knowing the ground might swallow them whole tomorrow. That's not just backdrop, that's worldview. It informs how communities organize, how knowledge is passed down, even how people grieve. Every shovel of soil carries tension, and every law, custom, and taboo comes from that one shared truth. The world is trying to kill us. This is where immersive world building comes from, not from complexity but consequence. And that's what so many writers miss. They build stunning cities and inventive rituals, but forget to ask, how does this shape the people living inside it? So let's flip that switch. Don't just list cool facts about your world, zoom in. Pick one element, currency, inheritance law, burial rights, and trace its ripple effects. Say in your world only second-born children can inherit land. That one rule might drive everything. Secret adoptions, false twins, political marriages designed to produce just the right heir. Suddenly family dinners aren't peaceful anymore, they are plots waiting to happen. Or picture a land where naming a child too soon is considered dangerous. That belief might stem from magic or myth, or nothing at all, but its effect could still be massive. What does it do to a parent's bond with their child? How do teachers address students? What happens when a name is spoken out loud by mistake? That tension between belief and behavior, that's what makes the world mesmerizing. And it works both ways. Let your characters push back against these pressures. Maybe your hero wants to mourn in private, but tradition demands a public right. Or maybe they benefit from an unjust system and have to choose whether to break it. This is where world building stops being scenery and starts becoming stakes. Because now the world isn't just where things happen, it's why they happen. And once that's locked in, you're not just writing scenes anymore, you're shaping cultures. You're weaving systems that feel too real to be invented. But even when executed perfectly, pressure alone will not do it. Because your readers don't just want truth, they want all. So next, let me dial back the grid and lean into wonder. A world doesn't have to be believable to feel real. It just has to make you feel something. Think about the floating mountains of Pandora in Avatar. The moment you see them, logic falters. Your brain doesn't say, yes, that makes sense. It says, wait, what if that was real? That's not realism, that's wonder, and it hits in a deeper place. Because wonder doesn't speak to the rational part of us. It speaks to the part that used to spin in circles as a kid just to feel the air rush. It breaks the grip of certainty, and in fantasy, that's pure gold. The problem is that a lot of fantasy trade all for architecture. Writers get obsessed with realism, clocks that sync, economies that balance, logistics that would impress a city planner. And sure, there is value in consistency. I certainly emphasize it again and again. But no one rereads a fantasy book just because the postal system worked. They reread it for the moment a waterfall runs backward, for the tree that blooms only when someone speaks their deepest regret, or for the sky that cracks open not because of signs, but because someone broke a promise. So if your world is feeling a little too grounded, here's how to lift it. Start by creating contrast. The mundane makes the magical pop. If your market smells like fish and sweat and dust, then a floating stall that sells glowing fruit feels earned, not random. Wonder thrives when it's not constant but precisely placed. Next, let your logic bend toward emotion. Not just what would happen, but what shouldn't happen and still does. Maybe a street vendor sells bottled light and when you open one it smells like your childhood home. Maybe a staircase only appears when you stop looking for it. These aren't fantasy rules, they are reveals, tiny impossible details that crack the world open sideways. This works best when you tie wonder to something personal. A floating island feels cool, but a floating island held up by the heartbeat of the last surviving giant? That's not just impressive, it's haunting. It hints at cost, at history, at the one detail no one wants to say out loud. And the most powerful kind of wonder here, it's the kind people in your world already believe in. They might expect the stars to flicker when someone tells a lie, or they keep water bowls near doors in case a soul returns. You don't need to explain this, you just need to show them acting like it's real for them. Doing so doesn't just lift your world, it anchors it. Because now you're not just writing wonder for your reader, you're writing wonder your characters grew up with. And once that awe lives inside the characters, it starts to transfer. The reader stops admiring the world and starts missing it before they even left. But even wonder still needs one thing to carry it. Not big action, not lore drops, just a single word in the right place, and that's exactly where we're going next. Now, maps tell you where you are, but language tells you who's welcome. Nothing makes a fantasy world feel lived in faster than a word that only makes sense to the people inside it. Not just a made-up name for a cool title, but a term that hints at belief, fear, pride, and history. And to get that right, you don't need a full glossary. You need three things: origin, emotion, and tension. Let me start with origin first. The strongest terms feel like they come from somewhere. A time, a trauma, a ritual no one performs anymore, but the word survived it. Think of a term like airfire. One word, but it carries the ashes of a long-dead tradition. Flames lit to mark succession, now whispered at coronations, half in reverence, half in fear. Or take the drifted, used for those who vanished before death. It's not a dictionary entry, it's a cultural scar. These words work because they don't ask for explanation, they hint at a deeper past and trust that the reader feels it too. Which leads us to the second part, emotion. Because origin alone isn't enough. The word has to land, and that happens through tone. You don't need a definition, you need a reaction. Maybe one character calls a cursed soldier blessed by ash, and the others go quiet. Or maybe someone names themselves unjoined, and the innkeeper offers them a bed by the fire without charging, without asking. These moments teach the word through context, through weight. The reader doesn't just learn that it means something, they feel what it costs. And that tells them this isn't just language, it's memory still alive in the room. Which brings us to the third point, tension. Words reveal who has power and who's trying to take it back. Maybe nobles call the poor dustlings. It's meant to belittle, but now imagine a rebel faction reclaims that word, tags it on walls, shouts it before battle. Suddenly the insult becomes a signal, a rallying cry. Now your story has a word that means two things depending on who's saying it, and when someone says it wrong, the stakes change. That's what you're after here. Terms that create friction not just in lore but in dialogue, in the scene. Words that make other characters flinch, stand taller, or draw a line. Because when language becomes contested, it stops being background and starts shaping how power moves through every conversation. Do this right, and a single term can carry more story than an entire paragraph. Now, having said that, this video showed you what fantasy readers love. The moments they underline, reread, and carry with them. But what if the scenes you're most proud of yourself are actually the one readers hate? Watch this video here next, where I'll show you the exact mistakes that break immersion, flatten emotion, and quietly kill your story's momentum, even when everything looks right on the surface.